Welcome back to Beyond the Uniform. I'm Justin Asiri, and my goal is to help military veterans succeed in their civilian career, whatever success looks like for their unique aspirations. Today's episode number 256 with Ben Chu at Amgen.
I think it's the toughest challenge veterans have, which is to communicate their work experience in a way that others will understand and respect and appreciate.
Well, Ben's first job out of the Army was at Amgen, and he has worked there for nearly 23 years. In this interview, we talk about the variety of roles he's held at Amgen. We also talk about Ben's extensive experience mentoring many veterans through American corporate partners. Ben shares advice for listeners based on his mentorship work and common challenges he's seen veterans face. He talks about the importance of understanding why you are leaving the military. He shares advice about networking and how a connection with another veteran led to his work in research and development. He talks about how to explain one's background to someone who is not familiar with the military. He shares why it's so important to be as close as possible to either selling a product or making a product. And we talk about much, much more. Special thanks to all of those who have left a positive review on iTunes. It helps us get the word out about the show. Special thanks to a username Infantry CPTNY, what is that? Infantry CP Tiny, maybe? Who said back in October, as a veteran who left the Army 13 years ago, I find Beyond the Uniform useful in learning about other businesses. I enjoy hearing about other successful veterans, their transition, and how they built their career in business. Keep the great interviews coming, and thank you for telling our veteran stories. Thank you. I think it's a great reminder that so many of you listening might not be on active duty, that you may be a decade or more out of the military just like me and enjoying hearing about the incredible journeys that other veterans take. As always, at beyondtheuniform.org, you will find over 250 other episodes just like this. For each of them, you will find show notes, and I encourage you to check out the show notes for Ben's interview that is full of different resources, a text transcript, links to everything we discuss. So with that, let's dive in to my conversation with Amgen's Ben Chu.
Hey, Justin, how you doing? It's great to be here.
At Amgen for nearly 23 years, starting out in their engineering organization, and then with the help of the Veterans Network, landing a product management or a PM role in research and development, where he has worked in a variety of leadership roles, including preclinical, clinical, regulatory and safety, and now commercialization. Ben holds a Master's of Science in Engineering from UCLA and an MBA from the Pepperdine University. And for listeners, be sure to check out in the show notes, if you didn't listen to it, episode 252 featured Bree Cameron, which is one of Ben's colleagues at Amgen, talking about her transition to veteran talent acquisition at Amgen. So, Ben, maybe to start things off, you transitioned back in 1996. Just for context and for listeners to get to know you, could you share a little bit more about what that transition was like and what led you to your first and last job from leaving the Army at Amgen?
Yeah, sure. So thanks a lot for the intro, and happy to share with you my decision-making process and how I went about it. I still remember I was at UCLA and had the opportunity to choose my next command, my next assignment, and I could go anywhere in the world. And it was, it's the first time anything like that has ever happened to me in my military career. And I shared with my girlfriend at the time, Adora, that I had this great opportunity, and I wanted to see where she wanted to go, and she started to cry. So right after that discussion, I kind of figured that I needed to start to look at other opportunities that were closer to LA. My extended family, my in-laws primarily live in the Los Angeles area, and my wife had lived almost all of her life in the LA area. So I started to look and network for opportunities in the Los Angeles area. So that's kind of how I came to the idea that I would leave the military. So.
That's great. And for listeners, I think from previous guests on the show, it seems like, having, like Ben talks about, you have all this freedom. For the first time, you're able to choose every one of a million different options for your job. And sometimes just putting a stake in the ground, in Ben's case, it was geography, that actually helps the process, because then you have a constrained universe of possibilities rather than I can go anywhere, anytime, any place. And what, Ben, drew you to Amgen?
So the path which took me to Amgen was not a very direct one. So I was looking at a number of different opportunities. I was looking at some consulting opportunities, some technical sales opportunities, small companies, big companies, and I actually had a couple of offers in hand. But when I went to Amgen, I was really impressed with the quality of the people. I was really impressed at how nice they were. I was impressed with how smart they were. And there was just this vibe about Amgen that was really exciting, and it just felt really cool. And to a certain extent, my gut helped direct me towards Amgen, even though I had other really interesting opportunities. So I think the people really attracted me, and of course the mission was very, very interesting. The whole idea that I could leave the military, where my mission was to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and then shifting over to an organization that was dedicated towards the mission to serve patients with grievous illness. I have always felt really proud about having the U.S. Army and Amgen as the two main entries in my resume. And,
I love that. I mean, I love that mission focus, and I can imagine how going from one organization that's doing, service to others to another one with that same mission. I imagine that kind of gives you an identity and purpose.
Yeah, I mean, the mission is something that you definitely pick up when you interact with people from Amgen. And even back then, people were very passionate about it. And, Amgen was a lot smaller back then. And it's been really exciting to see it grow over the years. I guess the other thing I'll add around Amgen was, I think there's a couple of people who helped direct me to Amgen. One in particular was my uncle Hank Zern, and I always credit him for being really financially savvy and being aware of the financial status of certain companies. And Amgen at the time was not a very well-known company, and when he learned about it, he did some research, and he quickly got back to me, and he was like, "You really have to think about, going for Amgen. Amgen's financially they're very, very stable, and they've got a bright future in front of them." So I'll always remember the help of my friends and family in helping me make the decision. So I think that's maybe a bit of advice for folks as well too, is to look at your network and look at the people that you trust most to help you with really important decisions.
That's awesome. Well, for listeners, to give you kind of a brief roadmap of the intended path, I would love to use our time with Ben, and we're going to talk about, he's done a tremendous amount of mentorship with veterans and counseling them. So we're going to dig into some of the things he's learned there. and then we're going to talk about Amgen in general, and then we're going to drill into Ben's specific role and the work he does there. So, Ben, I know that you've done a lot of work with American Corporate Partners, or ACP, and for listeners in the show notes, I'll have a link to episode 151 where we provide an overview of ACP with Tim Cochran. But could you share a little bit more about your work with ACP? And in particular, as you have counseled veterans throughout the years, is there any advice that you typically give or thoughts that you have for listeners?
Yeah, so I guess to give you the context of my experience with ACP, so I've probably worked with a dozen or so veterans through ACP, and in those opportunities, I've had the opportunity to work with them, meet with them on a periodic basis, provide them with advice and suggestions on how to approach their career. And the approach I've always taken with transitioning veterans is really just to provide them with information that will arm them to make the best decision possible for them and for their families and for their specific situation. So I don't think any one particular situation is always the same. It's been a lot of fun seeing other people go through this journey. And as I reflect on the ones who've handled the transition really well, I think they have a sense of initiative and they have a strong sense of what they're interested in. And if there's one bit of advice I could have for folks who are transitioning is to take the time to study and to think about what it is that really makes them tick and what assignments have they had in the military that they enjoyed the most. And in doing so, how could they take those assignments and parlay them into the next part of their journey?
I think that's fantastic, and I think that one of the trends that comes through from guests is the importance of self-knowledge. And so I love that thought of taking that time to, like you said, to figure out what makes them tick and what they enjoyed most. And, that, I think that's a great start. Have you found any effective ways to do that, to just kind of better understand oneself and one's motivations?
I think I'll talk a little bit about reflecting on the assignments that you really enjoyed and trying to break down the pieces of those specific assignments that you enjoyed and what aspects of it did one really enjoy about those particular assignments. Maybe it was working within a team. Maybe it was persuading or recruiting or selling to people new ideas and new products. Maybe it was developing strategies and planning for deployments. So whatever it might have been, trying to break down the specific piece that you really enjoyed, and then based on that, then thinking about what types of careers might you want to pursue, and what careers or companies might find that experience relevant. And sometimes it helps to talk to people that you worked with, because in some ways, the people that you served with might have a really good appreciation for what you did and what you can bring to the table. I know that when I left, I sometimes talked with my brother who also served. I talked with family members. I talked with my girlfriend at the time. And it was really interesting to have their take in terms of what things I would want to consider and think about as I looked at my new career. I guess the other thing I'd throw out there, and I always ask all the transitioning veterans I talk to, is to a certain extent I try to understand why they're wanting to leave the military. And I guess maybe a part of it's because I'm a patriot and because I'm so respectful of their commitment and service, especially post 9/11. And so I want to sense check it with them. Why is it that they're wanting to leave? And to also give them a little bit of feedback on what it's like being out of the military. And I actually remember my uncle Ignatius really did a great job. I remember having a great dinner with him and over a glass of wine after dinner. I remember him talking to me about what is it that you're looking for in corporate life. And he had served as a very successful general manager in industry for many years in a number of international assignments. And he actually helped me think through about what life after the military would be like. And he also helped to manage my expectations as well, too. And so I'm always very thankful of that discussion.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know in the Beyond the Uniform coaching program, a lot of the feedback I've gotten is how valuable that is. That I think there's been at least 2 people who started that process intent on getting out, and then through the values work and the reflection you're describing, actually made the decision to stay in. And just like you, I just believe that all of us are unique. We have unique aspirations, and it's not about convincing people one way or another. It's just giving them information so they can make the best decision for themselves and their family. And so what I love what you're talking about is just managing those expectations, because I know people I've spoken with have sometimes talked about their reason for leaving, and it's things that I have found to be the same in the civilian workforce. And so it's just important to know that if you're making a decision to move away from something, to make sure that what you're moving towards is not more of the same, or might not be just the grass is greener type of mentality.
Yeah. I guess in some ways, I always start my mentorships with kind of I kind of challenge the individual to think through, what is it that you want to get out of your transition, and how do you think it's going to be different from the military? Because in some ways it may not be that different. And I want them to be aware I want them to be fully aware of what life after the military may be like. And I never want to be in a position where I encourage someone to leave the military and they leave and they find out that they're just not happy. Because there's a lot of great things about the military, and there's great things about the military service. And so I guess I always start out with that as a starting point. And once people are beyond that and they explain to me what their logic and their rationale is, I then try to see what path or what journey they want to take after that. And I guess that's the other bit of advice I'd have for people is to have fun and enjoy the journey. I mean, how many times during our careers, Justin, have we been given an assignment or been asked to do something that we weren't completely excited about, right? And now, when one is transitioning from the military, you basically have the exact opposite. You have the opportunity to choose whatever path or journey you want to. There's no one in Washington, D.C. telling you that this is the next assignment you need to take in order to make it to the next level. You don't have a checklist of assignments that you have to accomplish in order to take the opportunity that you really want to pursue. So it's really transitioning is a great opportunity if you've made the right decision for yourself and for your family to leave the service.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is what advice do you have for listeners about how to communicate their military experience effectively? I know that's a pain point that a lot of listeners have.
Yeah, I mean, great. It's a great. I think it's the toughest challenge veterans have, which is to communicate their work experience in a way that others will understand and respect and appreciate. And I served in the Army, so I've actually recently been interacting with an individual who is a decorated veteran and a U.S. Army Ranger, and understandably so, he's very proud of his experience and his combat service and his time as a U.S. Army Ranger. I guess the one thing I cautioned him is that in many cases, people may not understand what a U.S. Army Ranger is and what a big deal that is. And so one of the things I've worked with him in particular on was how do you quickly cut to the chase to explain to someone what a U.S. Army Ranger is and what it is that they do. And that they're that they're one of the most elite fighting forces in the world, and to explain very succinctly what his role was within the Army Rangers. And so I think finding the right terminologies and the right ways to explain what you do is incredibly important, and a lot of thought has to be given to it, because you want to be truthful, but at the same time you want to explain it to people in a way that they can appreciate and understand. I think probably the other part, which is really key about explaining your work experience in the military, is breaking down exactly what you're extremely passionate about, what you're really good about, what you're excited about, and being able to explain it to people and communicate it to people. So that, because passion in a lot of ways in an interview is a lot like winning. I think it makes up for a host of errors. And so I think it's very important to find the things that you really care about and that are near and dear to your heart, and find a way to express it and let it come out of you, because I think people really want to see that they want to get beyond that resume, and they want to get beyond the uniform, so to speak.
I love it. And before we move on to diving more in depth on Amgen, what thoughts do you have for listeners around networking and mentorship?
Networking is such an incredible, even in the military, right? I think there used to be a saying in the military, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And to a certain extent in life, that applies in all walks of life. Networking is really, really important, and it can be extremely, extremely powerful. And I've learned through my career, I think, as you mentioned earlier, people, especially very early in my career, when I first joined here at Amgen, my first hiring manager was a former nuke sub guy, which I believe you were as well.
Absolutely.
And Andy Bade, I will always remember him and very much appreciate him taking a chance and hiring me. If it wasn't for him, who knows? Maybe I wouldn't have ever gotten into Amgen. But I'm always very appreciative of Andy hiring me on. And then I worked in Andy's area for about 2 years, and actually one of my coworkers, one of my colleagues, Patricia Turney, had shared with me that there was an opportunity in R&D, a project leadership role, and it was also another military veteran who was looking to hire into that position. So I guess from my own personal experience, what I'm trying to share with the audience is that as someone who has served in the military, you belong to an incredibly important network and valuable network, which is people who have served in the military. And so when you decide to get out, especially with the help of LinkedIn and with other social networking tools and just good old-fashioned, talking to people and grabbing coffees with people or grabbing lunch with people, you can find out a lot, and get a lot of really, really great advice. And it's the kind of advice that can really help shape your career. So I really encourage people to leverage their military network. And I guess the other thing I want to be quick to point out too is it's not like your network has to be developed and in place over 10 years or something like that. It can be very brief interactions and short-term interactions, and from those interactions you can get huge breaks within your career. And I think a lot of people, they have great stories about how they met someone that introduced them to someone else, and that person then considered them for a role. And that's exactly what gave me my break in R&D. If you look at my background, it doesn't scream R&D program manager. But it was because people took the opportunity to give me a chance, and it was from those early project leadership roles that I proved myself, and I ultimately was able to get into the position that I'm in today.
That's great. And I think that, most people in the military, I think that they spike on relationships. I think they're really good at making friends and connecting. And for some reason, there's this disconnect where networking is a four-letter word. It's something that they want to avoid. And I think that what you're saying is great, because it's not only an opportunity to give back to others, but it's an opportunity to receive help from them. And I think that veterans can do a really adept job at it if they just view it as just hanging out, getting to know people, and not view it as, I think sometimes they perceive it as very transactional, which has not been my experience, or doesn't need to be the experience. So Ben, let's. I want to drill down on more information on Amgen, and then also more information about your current role, but also you've had such broad experience within a single company. So to start things off, what would you want listeners to know about Amgen, and in particular, why might people who've served in the military really enjoy life at Amgen?
So, going back to our mission, I think we've got a great mission, and the mission to serve patients is something that's much bigger than, just about, hitting a revenue target, or, it's about making a difference. It's making a difference in our society, and to be able to develop innovative solutions and products for people that are in real need, people who have struggled to address their health issues. It's a real privilege to work at Amgen, and I think the mission is very powerful, and it's a great opportunity for people who have served in the military to apply their service now to a new mission. I think I guess one of the other reasons why I think people who've been successful in the military will also find that they can be successful at Amgen is because we're very team-oriented. And so, as an example, in my current role, I'm responsible to be a cross-functional leader. I work across a number of different areas. I work with people from marketing. I work with people from development. I work with people from medical. I work with people from regulatory. And I have to work with these people to develop strategies and budgets and timelines that will allow us to be competitive in the marketplace, as an opportunity to serve patients. And a lot of the things that I learned in the military are the things that I apply today: trusting and respecting people, being proficient, working hard, communicating, and communicating people in a transparent and down-to-earth fashion. So I think Amgen, for me, has been a wonderful place to work, and a lot of the fundamentals that I learned in the military are things that I still reflect on and use today.
And if someone listening is interested in Amgen, and maybe they don't even know the first thing about biotechnology, what would you say to them in terms of next steps, or learning more, or maybe even applying to a job at Amgen?
Yeah, I think I would share with them two things. The first one is that everyone is always new to the first field that they go into. So at some point in time, everyone is new to the field of biotechnology, or whatever field you decide to go into, for that matter. But then secondly, the other thing I'll mention is that about 3/4 of the roles that we have open right now are not scientific or medically related. They're more generalist and operational in nature. And so I think it's important to know that in the same way in the military, I think there's a metric that says like 1 out of 7 folks in the military are trigger pullers. It's kind of the same way at Amgen. There's not everyone is a medically trained doctor. Not everyone is a PhD in biology. There's a lot of people here. We have a lot of roles that are, business related, administratively related, and we need good people to fulfill those roles as well. It takes a lot of different people to come up with therapies that make a difference.
That's great. And then I'd love to delve into your background. What I think is different for you than a lot of guests is you have really gotten to know so many different facets of a company. And for listeners, when you hear of someone like Ben who has spent 23 years at a company, not only does that indicate like, okay, this company is doing something right, that they can retain talent for that amount of time, but also I think it's one of the advantages of working at a larger company. If you remember at the intro, some of the titles and responsibilities I listed off for Ben, it's a very diverse set of skill sets. And so when you work at a company like Amgen, you have the potential to grow with the organization and experience a lot of that diversity. And so maybe, Ben, if you could talk about, to start, how would you describe, if you were talking to someone on active duty, what is your current role right now?
Yeah, so in my current role, I'm a global program manager, and I work with cross-functional product teams to develop strategies, budgets, and timelines for the various efforts that we have ongoing.
And what does that look like on oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think what I'm anticipating is what exactly does that look like on a day-to-day basis. And day-to-day, what that involves is meeting with various team members, understanding what the challenges and issues are, seeing how we can go faster, seeing how we can do things better, and taking into account everyone's input to come up with the best strategies and the best possible outcomes for our products. That's a big part of the role on a day-to-day basis, is working with teams and people that may have competing interests, but finding win-win solutions and figuring out how we can be successful as a team.
And could you take us through maybe a representative day? What's your day look like? When do you get into the office? What sort of activities are you doing? Do you travel a lot, work on the weekends? Just to paint the picture of what life looks like for you.
Yeah, so in terms of travel is usually on a quarterly basis. I don't travel all the time. A lot of my work I can do, in just about any location in the world. I think Amgen's become a very progressive workplace. We have a lot of flexibility in terms of how I get my work done. I don't have a clock that I check in every morning, and we don't have any morning formations or anything like that. Basically, I will look at my calendar. I will figure out who I've got to contact, what work I've got to get done, and I plan out my day. Basically, I have a meeting with myself once a week. I figure out what things I need to get done. I get them on my calendar. I figure out who I need to meet with, what senior management forums we have to get prepared for. And then a lot of the things that I did in the military, backwards planning, the 1/3, 2/3 rule in terms of communication, developing a plan and then executing it. It's all very, very similar, and on a day-to-day basis, that's basically what I'm doing. Ultimately, what my role entails is I've got to map the strategy to the execution, and I got to make sure that we're executing in a way that's consistent with our strategy. And then periodically, we need to present strategic options for senior management to look at, to consider, and to potentially invest in. And as you can imagine, for those big investment decisions, the type of planning and the type of research that goes into those types of senior management interactions sometimes can span months to prepare for, so that we can make the best possible business case and valuation for our senior management to consider.
And You've also, because you've worked in different capacities, it looks like operations and program management and research development. Could you maybe group together for someone who's listening? Maybe they're on active duty, maybe they're not even familiar with what these different functional roles do. Could you maybe, looking back on your 23 years, group together the types of work you did and why veterans might want to consider a career path that focuses on that functional role?
Justin, thanks a lot for the question. As I look back in my career, even back to my time in the military and my time here at Amgen and the various leadership roles I've had, one consistent theme is the theme of project leadership or project management. And so I know a lot of people might think and might have the question, well, what exactly is project management? If you think about project management in its simplest form, project management is simply leading and managing a set of activities from start to finish to meet a certain set of specifications, whether it be from a time or resource standpoint. And I think most people who've led in the military have had some project management responsibilities. Maybe it was a deployment, maybe it was a project, a construction project, maybe it was a mission, but there was always a set of activities. The leader probably had to participate in the planning and then had to make sure that plan was executed against. And I think people in the military have a lot of project management experience, and so as a result are actually very good fits for the field of project management. Now, as it applies to the biotech space, and Amgen in particular, what I would do is I would look for any leadership role which has project in it. So specifically, look for project management, look for project associate, look for program management. All these terms, all these key words reflect project management responsibilities. And depending on at what level of responsibility you held in the military, that will probably be a good indicator in terms of where you might be a good fit at within corporate America. And so if you worked on smaller projects, you might look for project associate roles or project specialist roles. If you worked on larger projects with lots of people and lots of budget, that would probably fall in the line of project manager, program manager, or senior program manager. And if you worked on projects that had broad, far-reaching strategic impact within the military, then you may want to look for project director type roles. So hopefully that helps, and I hope it helps people to decipher and to translate their work experience from the military into project management specifically.
I love that. Sorry, I was taking notes on that. I love that distinction. I was on mute for a second. I love that distinction. I haven't heard that before, of being as close as possible to selling or making a product. And it actually, that makes sense for me. I think that it definitely resonates with me in terms of the roles and the type of work that I've enjoyed. And I think that's a nice rule of thumb especially for listeners who might not be as familiar with the types of jobs out there. It could be an interesting lens to view an opportunity through, is how close are you to building or selling a particular product. Another thing that I wanted to ask about was you've got two master's degrees, engineering from UCLA, an MBA from Pepperdine. Could you speak to how critical those advanced degrees have been in your career progression and trajectory?
So for me, education, I think what education does is it gives you just a little bit more confidence. And I don't know if I can say that without them, I would not have gotten the jobs that I've gotten. But what I can say is that the degree I got from UCLA gave me just a little bit more confidence when I interviewed with companies and when I talked with people about my background. It helped give me just a little bit more confidence in my background and my training, and in terms of its relevance to what people were looking for and needing for their companies. In terms of Pepperdine for me was a very helpful experience to help me get into the more senior management roles. It gave me a broader understanding of what business executives think about in terms of strategy, in terms of valuations, in terms of finances. For me, I felt it was a very critical part of my growth and development. I don't know if I can honestly say that either of the degrees were absolutely essential to me getting a particular role, but it certainly didn't help me. It certainly didn't hurt me.
I think that's great, and I think that one of the things I try to remember, 12 or so years out now from the military is I went directly from the military into grad school, and completely echo what you said. I think it was a great experience. And I try to bear in mind, too, the importance of just continuously learning. And I think one of the things that's great for members of the armed forces and veterans today, more so than any other time in history, is your ability to learn in multiple formats, any time of the day, whatever works for you. That could be a live conference, that could be learning on YouTube or taking a seminar or listening to podcasts or reading books. There's just so much information out there. And one of the things, Ben, I always like to ask guests is if there are any resources that you would recommend, conferences, books, podcasts, movies, whatever it is that might help someone listening to take that next step in their civilian career and grow, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reflecting on the earlier discussion. If I could go back to that just a little bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
In terms of schooling, I mean, just so people understand, I know very senior level people here at Amgen, vice presidents and I think in some cases senior vice presidents, people who've done extremely well, and they only have one degree, their bachelor's. So I think it's possible to be very successful in life with limited education, formal education. I think Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Michael Dell, they're all incredible examples of that. I think passion and drive makes up for a lot of that. But that being said, to your point, there are incredible resources for people to access now online. If people are really interested in biotechnology, the Khan Academy actually has a lot of free content that can be accessed, and it's very, very. I mean, it is top notch. I've actually reviewed it and taken a look at it. It's really, really incredible stuff. I think I need to provide a disclaimer, which is, Amgen helped to fund some of the development of that material. Anyways, I think there's so much that's available for people online, whether it's formal or whether it's informal free education. There's so much out there. If you find something that's interesting, there's so much that you can do on your own, in terms of learning and making yourself more marketable.
That's great. And I'll put in the show notes for listeners the link to Khan Academy. I haven't used them yet, but I've heard really great things. And I think you're right. I think that the quality of some of these resources is really exceptionally high. And the other thing that I'll add too is that, as Ben spoke about at the beginning, like we're all very unique in terms of what we're wanting. We're all very unique in terms of how we learn and the type of way we like to be given information. And so it's great to be able to consider multiple different resources and find the one that is right for you. It might not be a universal type of thing. Well, Ben,
that's a good point, which is I know for me, being in the classroom was very, very helpful, but probably not everyone feels that way. But I'm always very appreciative of the training I got at West Point, UCLA, and Pepperdine. But for some people that may not be their preferred way of learning, and if it's not, there is a lot of stuff that's out there. They just have to look around and find it.
That's awesome. Well, I know that we're getting close to the end of our time, but I always like to block off a chunk of time at the end to make more space for you to share anything that we haven't covered, or things that you really want to reiterate, or anything that you want to make sure that listeners know before we wrap up.
I think all I'll do is maybe just reemphasize and suggest that the importance of networking. Don't always assume it's got to be a deep relationship that one has that's going to help them get to the next step in their journey. But use them not just to, as you pointed out, don't just use it as like a transaction. It's like, hey, I want to look at a job in that company, and so therefore I want to network with that person. But think about people that you admire, that you respect. And maybe it's someone that you worked with a long time ago. Maybe it's someone you worked with or that you just met on an airplane a week ago. But reach out to that person and try to figure out what kind of knowledge and information might they share with you. And at the same time, I'm sure you'll be able to return the favor to them at some point in time. And in doing so, we all kind of help one another. So I guess that's a bit of encouragement I'd have. And then the last suggestion I would have is just to really seize the moment and enjoy the journey. And I'm so appreciative of people who've served in the military, and I encourage them to take their hard-earned freedom and independence and autonomy and really kind of have the deployment of choice, and think about an exciting journey that you want to take, and I wish them all the best of luck in following that path.
I think that's great, and to just chime in, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Ben, as well, on that first point, because I love the way that you put that. What it made me think of is anytime someone has reached out to me for advice or someone asks my opinion, it makes me feel like $1,000,000. It makes me feel really valued. And so I think that sometimes we feel like if you reach out to someone for advice or for networking or for help, like it's intrusive or that you're taking something away from people. But, I'm sure that Ben, he does a lot of work giving back to the military community. Obviously, I'm sure some of that is a desire to give back, but I also bet that, Ben, you get something out of that. You enjoy that opportunity. And I just want to highlight that for listeners, because I think that throughout Ben's advice, this whole piece of networking has been really significant. I think it's important to realize that it's can be a benefit to both parties. It's not this zero sum where you as the person approaching them are getting all of the value. Many of us who engage in this sort of mentorship and advising, we enjoy that too. So don't feel like you're inconveniencing people or anything with that. Would you agree with that, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people, when I interact with them, they're always like, well, hey, what can I do for you? Or, let me take you out to lunch. I really appreciate everything you've done. And I simply just tell them, hey, just do me a favor. Sometime 10 to 15 years from now, someone's going to ask you for help. And you just help them out. And let's just pay it forward. And no thanks is required, because I've certainly had a lot of help from my friends and family, and honestly, a lot from my military network. And so I'm very, very appreciative of that. And so when I help out others, it's just my small way of trying to pay it forward.
And it's great too, because thinking back on your story, I can think of when you made that transition to R&D, it was through the veteran network, it was through people helping you. I mean, we are all receiving this help, giving this help. It is part of the ecosystem, so that's great. Well, Ben, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate the work that you do helping veterans and mentoring them through American Corporate Partners. And I know, having been at Amgen for so long and being in such a senior position, you're also one of those role models for the military community of seeing someone who served in the military going on to achieve great things in their second career as a civilian. So thank you for all of those. Well, thank you so much for listening and for supporting Beyond the Uniform. Beyond the Uniform is produced and edited by me, Justin Nassiri. Our staff is entirely part-time. They do this on nights and weekends out of the goodness of their hearts to give back to the military community. Our director of outreach is Steve Bain, who relentlessly books guests, finds sponsors, puts together our newsletter, and thousands of other critical tasks every single week, all behind the scenes to keep Beyond the Uniform running smoothly. Our editor is Kathleen Dillon, who listens to and transcribes every single episode to help out those who don't have the time to listen to the show. It has a major impact on our site's SEO value, which helps people find us through Google. Our data analytics and insights advisor is Andrew Woolridge, who pores over the data each and every month to help us better understand how to best serve the Beyond the Uniform audience. Our digital production work is done by Michael Cummings, who puts together custom artwork for every episode. If you're enjoying Beyond the Uniform, the best way to help us out is by telling your friends and fellow service members and veterans. iTunes reviews, believe it or not, have a big impact on getting the word out as well. So if you have a chance to leave a positive review, that is greatly appreciated. If you know of a business that would like to get their product or service in front of a military audience, we are always on the lookout for sponsors, which helps us subsidize the cost of putting this show together. And if you haven't yet signed up for our newsletter, you can do so at beyondtheuniform.io. We send out a newsletter twice a month, and it is a treasure trove of helpful information for your civilian career and transition. And be sure to check out our coaching program, where you can be connected with a subsidized, professional, certified executive and career coach to help you in your career decision making. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week with more stories from military veterans about their civilian career. Take care.